For too long, building safety has been a topic that typically makes headlines only after tragedy. But behind every regulation, every inspection, every delay are real people. Residents who live with uncertainty and professionals who carry the weight of responsibility. And let's be honest, this system, it's complex, it's high stakes, and it doesn't always work the way it should. But that's why we're here. You see, this isn't another policy podcast. This is a space for truth-telling, for bridging the gap between regulation and reality. And today, we're starting with the professionals, the people who shape the system from the inside out. We're talking candidly, no spin, no safe answers, because the only way we build safer futures is by having braver conversations. Welcome to the Building Safety Roundtable, stories behind the strategy. I'm Naomi Osei, and it's time to talk. And on today's episode, I'm joined by three incredible guests who have played a pivotal role in helping Newham Council become the first local authority in the country to receive not just one, not just two, not three, not four, but 5 building assessment certificates from the Building Safety Regulator. I have the privilege of sitting down with Desmond Vincent, Head of Building Safety Services, Phil Davies, Quality Assurance Programme Lead, and Nigel Wiles, Housing Commissioning Manager. Together, they have navigated the complex challenges associated with compliance. They've skillfully led their teams and have first-hand experience in transforming policy into practice. So, whether you're a building safety professional, a housing provider, a resident who cares passionately about safety, or anything in between, there is something in this conversation just for you. So let's get into it.
My name's Desmond Vincent. I'm here really to talk about building safety from a perspective of someone that's been involved with the construction industry for over 30 years. My background primarily is as a chartered building surveyor, and have done many projects and worked with many clients in that area, and with a lot of residents around this area also. So someone that's really coming from that building surveying background into this space.
All right, thank you very much. And Phil, over to you.
Hi, my name's Phil Davies. I started many years ago as a health and safety consultant, and moved over to the world of fire safety, first joining the fire service with Bedfordshire and London Fire Brigade, and have since been in fire safety with residential housing.
All right, thank you. And Nigel, over to you.
My name's Nigel Wiles. I'm a chartered building surveyor like Des. I've been involved in building safety since about 2018 as part of the early adopters group. Worked in asset management, working with residents for most, if not all, of my career.
All right, fascinating. So we've got quite a broad range of experience in the room, and people coming from different backgrounds, but all quite closely related. And I guess the first question that I have for you all is why? Why this space? Why this sector? What motivated you to get involved, and why have you dedicated so many years of your life to service in this way?
I'm happy to go first. And set from my experience. And I think one of the things that people have worked with me will understand and know that I come from a place of transparency. And really, to answer that question, it was by accident. I came into the building safety sector as a new piece of legislation. I find it quite remarkable, because people will say, oh, we're expert building safety. There's elements of building safety in all of the work that we do in the construction area, but it's a new phenomenon, and people need to start from that place of honesty. So I was asked to set up a building safety service in line with the response to the Building Safety Act. And it was quite challenging, because everybody was doing something different, and the model wasn't really clearly set. And it didn't help, to be honest, in some respects, that at the 11th hour, we were asked to remove the description of the building safety manager. So that produced its own challenge challenges in terms of identifying what it is that we wanted. But in terms of coming into that space, it was because of my background in construction and delivering projects over a number of years, and was asked to set up a building safety team in response to the legislation.
All right, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Phil, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I think, well, my career, as I said, started in health and safety 20 years ago. And during that time, I, for a number of reasons, joined my local retained fire station and became a firefighter with Bedfordshire. And during that time, many, I think, well-known incidents took place. I then joined London Fire Brigade as a whole-time firefighter, and my career then took me into fire safety as an inspecting officer. And I think I found that where I was able to help more people at one time doing fire safety than I could operationally. And I think the number of challenges out there, the fact this is a continuous journey of learning, just suited me. So I became full-time fire safety. And then I think really for me in the fire service, when I was working with some big social landlords, my appetite for helping resolve complex fire safety issues led me then to move into the world of residential housing. And here I am still. Still,
with many years to go, I should hope as well.
I hope so.
And Nigel, what about you? What were some of your motivations to get into this space? What has driven you to keep going, and I guess to have dedicated all these years to this sector?
Well, and in terms of construction, I fell into it a bit by accident, really. I was destined or heading towards education, becoming a teacher. Suddenly, a big pivot to doing a construction qualification, and then joining a local authority as a surveyor. I'm not exactly sure at what point or what the motivation was to change, but I'm very, very pleased I did. And then moved to Housing Association and became Director of Technical Services there. It was that point of joining the early adopters group after the Hackett report where the interest came in terms of building safety. And as has been said earlier, building safety has touched a lot of work in construction, but I think it was unpicking how we got to where we did, the quality issues around construction, and the amount of work that still needed to be done, especially in an industry where we've been involved for many, many years. We started on that sort of journey through now to where we are with the legislation all in place. So what keeps you in there, I think, is the passion for the individuals that you find in this space at the moment. Everybody that I've come across in terms of the building safety space is really keen to learn the lessons and make sure that we don't have any issues again in the future, and we're really trying to take responsibility for driving that through to a conclusion. So it's a really busy, it's really complex and challenging environment, but there's a huge amount of reward at the moment.
Well, thank you for that, Nigel. And speaking of the reward, I mean, we have to address the elephant in the room right now. Your organization that you currently work for, the first local authority, should I say, in the country to receive a building assessment certificate. Definitely the envy of many, many, many of us all around the country. I just really want to ask, how does that feel? How does it feel to be part of history in this way?
Well, I'll go with that because I'm still thrilled. I was thrilled when we got the notification, and it has been a real journey. And I think that word's overused a lot, but actually since sort of 2018, all the way through working in terms of the legislation that was coming, the working teams, the working parties, trying to get to grips with the ambiguity of the change and what that would mean, and then actually providing something, presenting it to others, and then getting what we've been working towards for many, many years is a recognition for residents that the buildings are safe. I think there's a lot of people in lots of local authorities, social housing and elsewhere who are working incredibly hard as well, and these back applications will be flowing through. I'm very, very certain of that across all organisations. But it's hard not to say we were incredibly pleased, and did have a little celebration.
Only a little celebration?
That would be telling.
Phil, Desmond, tell me what has it been like for you?
I think to come into the team that had put together such dedicated and hard work, and it's quite a small team, to be really honest with you, and really being able to come in and set some frameworks and processes in place to help streamline that, because what we got to understand is that it's something that's delivered by many. And so whilst you have a team that's developing a case, we've had consultants that have come into that space to work with us, but there's also a number of services that need to feed into that. And I think that we reminded ourselves when we passed the processes and passed the accolade that people have lost their life in this space. And it's something that I remind myself and the team that I'm proud to be leading remind ourselves of. And I think when I posted it, it was really to cite people back to I think I'm really proud of us as a country that we take building safety, that we make new legislation. And some of us may argue around the fact that it may feel knee-jerk and we don't get it quite right, but it's the desire to get it right. And it's a fundamental piece that I hold in terms of the way that I lead my team and the way that we do things. So yeah, it feels really great. I feel really great for the residents, and the proof is in the pudding that we continue that assessment and ensuring that we keep people safe.
Love that. Phil, what about you? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's an amazing achievement by the team. Nigel has worked especially hard on this process, and it's been fantastic watching it bear fruit. I think for me, what I'm most proud in is the fact that it's an example of a landlord that has asked questions of itself. It has looked at its practices, its portfolio, how it manages fire safety. It's found where there are opportunities to improve, and it's made those improvements. And I think just the fact that there's now a certificate that can give residents the assurance that as a landlord, we're taking ourselves very seriously. We're taking their safety very seriously. And I think that's paramount. I think that's really important. So yeah, as well as there's a Nigel, just very proud of everything that's happened, really.
I love that. And I guess the question that I've got that is coming from everything that you're saying is, of course, it's been a long journey. Nigel, I know that you've got a unique perspective given the length of time and the vantage point that you've had in terms of this entire journey. But I guess I want to bring it back to the people that it's really all about. So whilst we will have our celebrations, whilst we will feel proud, whilst we will be celebrating and be really happy about what's achieved, I want to bring it back to a moment to the people that this really is centered on, and which is the residents. And I guess, and maybe Phil, I might start with you because of your background in fire safety. But from a fire safety perspective, what does the back actually mean to someone who's living in one of these high-rise buildings? How does how does being in receipt of a back really raise the bar from the perspective of a landlord and also for a resident? So what? I guess really is the question.
I think it boils down to how well the residents will understand the process, and I hope that they spend some time trying to understand what you need to do to get a back at the moment, because I think what it will say to the residents, it will tell them that we've looked at that building, we have had to evidence to the regulator that we manage safety by design and intent, not by luck. And if there are any gaps in that information that we provide, the regulator challenges us. And the regulator will say, it's great that you said you do this, can you evidence it? So we provide evidence. It's great you say you're going to do something, can you produce the evidence to confirm you've done it? So it's a continuous journey of illustrating by evidencing that this building is being maintained. And I think as a resident, that will give you great confidence. There's a lot of conflicting information, scaremongering, confusion in the media about fire safety. People think that their buildings are inherently unsafe. The fact is they're inherently safe. And I think this goes a long way to showing that you can have confidence in the building that you live in. And this is just like a seal of approval from an independent external regulator. So I think it's great for anyone living in a building that's got a back displayed on the wall, definitely.
So, which leads me to a question I actually had for Nigel. Phil mentioned something. He mentioned about residents perhaps understanding the process or the journey that is required you have to go on in order to actually get one of these certificates. And I guess I'm wondering, Nigel, do you think that there needs to be any extra work done, or whether it be changes in legislation, or do we have to do better in educating residents perhaps on that process, in order for there to be a real appreciation of what this actually means?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm glad you picked that up from Phil's comments. I think there's more there's a need to consistently provide information to residents. It's a new regulatory regime. We're all trying to get to grips with it, and that's the same for officers as it is for residents. I think we have our building resident engagement strategy, and that has loads of commitments in there about how we're going to provide information to residents in terms of their building, how we're going to push information, how we respond to requests for information. I think there's still a lot of work for landlords to do to push information to residents, to put into context what the BAC certificate is and why it's important, and how you can ask questions around your building and your safety. And that's what we'll be doing over the next few months. But I think it is going to be a continuous process of providing information, updating information, engaging with residents at every single stage of works to their building in the future, which is something that hasn't been done before. But getting a balance between engagement and not swamping the plane, as it were, with requests for information or pushing information out. So I think the two things need to go hand in hand, but it is a new regime and we're all getting to grips with it. So it will take a little bit of time to fully touch down.
Okay, I appreciate that. Which then leads me to a question that I've actually got for you, Des. This term, engaging with residents, resident engagement, we've got a resident engagement strategy. We have bespoke strategies for each of our buildings. This term, engagement, is getting bandied around a lot, and rightly so, because it is critical that we do keep our residents at the heart of strategy when it comes to managing or assessing and managing the risks of these buildings. But as a head of service, I guess I'm wondering. Nigel spoke to the balance. How do we really, in real terms, or how would we, in real terms, really integrate the opinions and the thoughts and the feelings coming from residents, and how does that end up impacting our strategy and our approach to building safety in a real tangible way? Because I guess the reason I'm asking is because sometimes it can seem to residents as maybe a bit of a tick box exercise. Oh yeah, they say they engage with us, they send us a little piece of paper that's got asking us some questions, we say whatever, but do we ever really see the impact or the effect of our thoughts and opinions? So I'm wondering, how do we actually do that in practice? How do we make it move away from being a tick box exercise so that we can satisfy the regulators' demands, to actually being a meaningful piece of work that truly does carry residents along the journey with us?
Yeah, no, brilliant question again. I think what I want to go back a little bit and to say, in terms of that certificate and that assessment, it's an assessment in a moment in time. And it's that continued engagement, that continued review and ownership, and that we don't get carried away and that we've received a certificate that says actually I'm qualified. Because we find ourselves in this position, I think, when we got buildings that went through its rigorous assessment, and then years later on, we haven't invested in that building and understood that building and how it's changed. And so I would say that when the professionals are talking about material change and the engineers are getting excited, and it's important, people have changed in the way that they use those buildings and how they operate. And it's about being able to come into a space that has some really challenging bits that I think people are fearful of when they speak to residents, because sometimes the implications are around the level of investment needed based upon what comes out of that conversation. And all of us are struggling with our budgets to deliver all the many things that we need to do. There's more regulatory responsibility, but we actually want the regulator not to be the driving force, but us as landlords who live in homes and have family that lives in homes are really concerned and connected with the residents. So I think there's something about being able to go into a space, as you use in your phrase, around having an honest conversation to remove the tick box and to really start and engage in that process with residents. And I think a lot of the time, if I'm honest, we have the same residents representing the views of all of the residents, and we have to find a way of engaging with a wider band of residents. And there's some practicality issues around that in terms of whether or not you can get, it's not just about whether it's someone's gender, their ethnicity, it's getting a real wide understanding of the issues. And it's going to take investment and it's going to take time. And so I think it's about, I would summarize and say, going into that space without the fear of trying to preempt what the outcome's going to be, and about a way of reaching as many residents, not in a tick box way, but real engagement with those residents. And we talk about leaseholders, and we talk about tenants, and we talk about other landlords who are acting on behalf of those residents. We talk about commercial residents that are managing and in shops. It's a whole array of people that we need to start that process. And I hope that by closing in terms of this point is that the technicality and the material changes and the way that we understand our buildings and how they operate, we don't lose the people and the way that they operate in those buildings.
And it's so easy to do, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure if I were to ask around the room, you know, the type of pressures that you're currently facing, the deadlines that you're being asked to meet, the demands are great. And it's easy to kind of, you know, go tunnel vision on the specific task that you've been given. So I guess the question that I've got then on the back of that is how do we keep the big picture in mind? How do we ensure that we are doing what is required of us, but then also not losing sight of the bigger picture? How do we do that in a really practical way? And I appreciate that might be a bit of a challenging question in terms of being able to actually define. But, you know, I guess it's easy for us to come and say things. It's easy for us to say that we have to keep the residents in mind. And it's easy for us to say, you know, that we want our residents to feel heard and that we want them to be safe. We want them to actually feel safe. But in practice, when you've got competing priorities, Phil, when Nigel, people are breathing down your neck because you have to deliver what you have to deliver. When Des, you have 1,000,001 reports to write. How do we ensure that we're keeping sight of what really matters? Does anyone have any ideas?
Yeah,
no, go for it, Phil.
I think for me, one of the key points is to make sure that we focus on our residents when we are producing anything. If we are looking at risk assessments, if we're looking at surveys or commissioning reports, it's, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Is that report or that assessment telling us what it needs to tell us? And if we just accept what we're given and we don't read them with the resident in mind, we miss the point, we miss the purpose of it. So it's right that we do a lot of quality assurance work to make sure that what we're receiving is appropriate. We make sure that it's going to allow us to improve the building or keep the building safe, and challenge if we think that it's not. So it's us always making sure that we're working as a team, making sure that whoever we're helping or whoever's supporting us is a part of that team, that network. It's all for the common goal. I think also engaging with the residents in that process. If we're going to do something on the back of any of these surveys or reports, it's making sure the residents know what we're doing, why we're doing it. They can voice their opinion and their feelings as well. And I think it's key. An important thing to remember is we call them residents, but these residents are great people. There are going to be architects, building surveyors. There's going to be a lot of skills living in these blocks that can actually help us as a landlord keep them safe.
Yeah. So I guess I'm hearing from you is about more effective collaboration and maybe sometimes even co-designing or co-creating solutions that because it is that appreciation that we're not doing building safety to people, but it's something that we're doing rather in partnership, and it's so they're not having stuff done to them, but rather with them. I really like that perspective. Thanks for sharing, Phil. Nigel, you spoke at the same time.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Sorry, yes, just to I think it comes down to three things really. Is organisational culture, leadership, and then the strategy. So, creating an organisational culture where safety is front and centre at everything that we do, puts the residents at the heart of our decision making is really crucial. I think we need leadership from all areas, so we have leaders everywhere, both in terms of the surveyors on the ground all the way through to the leaders of the organisation, and that we can map out a cohesive strategy for each building, but also then consolidate it up as to a building safety strategy that goes across all of the portfolio, so that at all times we're delivering something that has a mapped out journey in terms of where we want to get to. So they're the three things that I think are important for organisations to address.
Des, I wonder if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think we're all passionate. I know we're all passionate about it. Nigel won't offer that, but he's a non-exec and he does a lot of great work with different organizations to try to help them with their asset strategy, because we care. And I think that we had an away day a few weeks ago and some really basic fundamental questions we revisited. And I think that when you talk about how do we implement this, I think it's about going back to basics. I know it's a key buzzword that we say, but it really does mean going back, because when we were looking at ourselves, there were some things that we were doing and we were asking ourselves, well, why are we doing it? It was because we've always done it. And it's that the ability to stop and pause and reflect. And I'm part of different resident engagement groups. And I remember one of them where residents said, you've got some key officers that have started and you haven't even told us that. And I think it's about redefining that relationship with the organization and the people that we serve, and that we've set out traditional ways of engagement, but how can we do this differently? And how can we have real dialogue where we're listening and responding to what we're hearing?
So it's a and I'm hearing from you, it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge task. There is lots that's involved in making this a reality. And as you said earlier, Des, it's about moving away from the tick box even, and moving into something that becomes the lived experience of everyone involved. Now, you all have different roles, you all have different backgrounds, you all have been involved in different levels of managing building safety across different organizations. And I guess when you think about the sector as a whole, when you think about the challenges that are faced, when you think about some of the competing priorities, when you think about some of the external and internal pressures, I'm interested to know what keeps you personally up at night. If this is something that you think about outside of the working hours, what are some of the things that go on in your mind when you're reflecting on the industry as a whole, when you're reflecting on the sector, when you're reflecting on the weight of responsibility that lies on the shoulders of people just like you across organizations in this country? What are some of those things that keep you up at night and that you try to square off in your mind?
I can definitely go there. I think for me, it's the pace that this is all going at, the pace of the change in legislation, the pace of the expectation of landlords to achieve compliance. And I think
sorry, Phil, to interrupt. When you say the pace, what do you think it's too fast? Do you think it's too slow? What about the pace?
I think there's two things. It can't come fast enough. Is a reality, but I think the realism is that to become compliant, you need to understand the legislation, you need that skill set, you need the resources, and the at the moment there's quite a vast change in fire safety regulation. The Building Safety Act's come in, and it's people need time to adapt, to learn the regulations, to implement the regulations, and I think for me that's the concern. I think is you always need to keep up to speed. You always need to try and plan for what's coming next. And I think anybody that's in this sector would be worrying that, have they covered all bases? Have they included this in their forward planning? Are they aware of all the nuances that these regulations are now bringing with them? And I think that's, for me, it's the competency level and just the sheer volume of people that are needed to come into this sector to enable all landlords to cope, because it's very resource intensive. And that for me is my one real concern. But we're making small steps and we're getting where we need to be.
Yeah. Nigel, what about you?
Yeah, well, there's a number of things that keep me awake, worrying at night. But in terms of making sure that the sector sort of learns the lessons and that we continue to make progress and that there's lasting change. That was the whole intention of this. That it cuts deep. And it does change, the whole culture of construction and the way in which we manage buildings. I think there's lots of challenges there, especially buildings in occupation, and making sure that we don't become derailed on that. We need sort of software companies to step up, provide better asset management systems and information management tools to enable us to manage buildings in occupation. And I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity. I think Des mentioned it earlier with the building safety manager as a career choice, a career post, and not being mandated. So you have now organisations managing buildings in a variety of different ways, and there is a risk, I think, that maybe this gets distilled down into something that no one wants it to be, which is a process or a form-filling exercise rather than a deep cultural belief in terms of making change permanent and ensuring safety.
Fascinating. Des, what about you?
I think I know what keeps me up at night in regards to this sector is that are people safe, and not only dealing with the stock that you're responsible for, but the wider stock that's in the private sector. If you're working in the public sector and understanding in the borough that are people safe. I had a relative about 2 months ago that passed away in a building linked to a fire. So these things keep me up at night. And have I done enough? Have we done enough? And making sure that we're looking at ourselves. I think the biggest concerns around achieving that, for me, Phil touched on that, is competency of trying to fill that gap and people moving up too quickly in an industry that's not like data and IT. These are buildings that are very old, a lot of the time that we're talking about in terms of the older stock that we're really struggling with to make sure that they can operate in a way in 2025. And we really need to tap into that skill base. And it's challenging. A lot of those skills have left into retirement. A lot of those skills are sparse. And we're plugging the gap sometimes, I think, too quickly because of the challenges of resources and training and education. And so competency is definitely one, and the infrastructure to ensure that it's suitable so that we can do the job to keep people safe. So yeah,
I'm keen to know about some of those challenges that are being faced right now, and for people who may be sitting at home in the office watching this right now, thinking, "Oh my goodness, I've got that exact same challenge." I wonder how they would approach. I wonder if you'd be able to share anything.
Inconsistency. It's just like, what is the standard? And how is that standard applied? And if you're speaking to one person, is that the consistent message for somebody else? And we can get into the technicalities of liability and who wants to own the risk, and we're passing on the ability for a landlord to understand its risk. But for me, it's the inconsistency potentially from the approach, and that I think there needs to be some bravery about standardizing that. And, without getting too technical, for example, when we've spoken about compartmentation, which basically to all means the way that we have a building compartmentalized, shaped so that the spread of fire is managed. And different landlords are approaching this in different ways. But the buildings are the same buildings fundamentally. And I just think that there really needs to be that bravery from the central part, that government that sets out that standard, that says, this is the way that we've tried and tested, like the approved documents. We've set out a standard. And I think the safety case needs to kind of get to that place, because when you look at places like the London Council, everyone's gathered around like, what have you learned? What have you not learned? And really, if the standard is set out, we get consistency and we get approach, and we learn together and we make the mistakes together in the approach for safety. So that would be my piece on that.
Phil, your thoughts?
I think I was going to, Des beat me to it. I think it's consistency. I think for me, it's things like risk assessments, door inspections. It's you'll see on the various social media sites where you will have somebody referencing a compliant door, and then there'll be a big discussion, stroke debate on, well, compliant with what? And these could be two very senior, experienced experts in their field, but they still have a difference of opinion. I think the same with fire risk assessment. And I think the issue for us is, as a landlord, is you would commission something that would be required, say, for the building safety case. Just for example, say a type 4. There is no defined standard for a type 4. So what you get might not necessarily be what you was expecting to get. And it's that inconsistency. And I think it goes throughout all of building standards, building regulations, because everything is open to interpretation. And even I know that the phrasing of things has to be so, but when you have words like adequate, suitable, it's too vague. And so you might be okay with what you've done, you might not be okay. How do you know someone hasn't tried their best and missed the mark, as opposed to somebody who hasn't even attempted to score a goal? So I think for me, that needs to be tightened up.
Thank you. Nigel, I saw you came off mute earlier.
Yeah, no, I've only got a couple of things. Both have been said, I think, already. But one, Des mentioned it was a small team. That wasn't really by design. We have a small team because of the real challenges around recruitment. And I think across the whole sector, recruiting to this space is really difficult. It's really challenging, and people are moving around quite quickly between organisations because of the opportunities. So I think recruitment will continue to be a problem and something we need to address. And I think systems, moving to a new regulatory regime using the old spreadsheet-based systems or historical housing management systems are just not going to be fit for purpose. And we very much, the sector needs to invest in technology, especially we've got BIM toolkits. We have standards. Des mentioned there standards and consistency. Well, that exists through adopting sort of building information management techniques. But the vendors need to step up and provide some of that, make it accessible to asset management environment rather than just on new developments. So they're the two things I think will be challenging for the longevity of the process, is getting the right people, keeping them there, and also having the right tools and systems to manage these buildings, many of which are quite complex.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you talk about the recruitment, and I really want to just touch on that because I remember from what you were all saying in the beginning in terms of your own pathways into this space. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if any of you who are doing what you are doing today as a child dreamt that this is exactly what you would be doing when you got to this age. And it's a similar thing for me as well. So I guess in terms of the pathways to this sector, in terms of being able to raise the profile and allowing young budding professionals coming up to even know that something like this world exists, what do you think we could be doing more of in order to ensure that we do have a steady stream of competent, well-learned professionals coming through? What could we do to address that?
I think the professional bodies are trying to do that, and I think there's a number of them, whether it be CABE, RICS, CALB. I think there's a number of professional organisations are trying to do that and provide the training routes in. I'll be careful about what I'm about to say, but I worry at the speed in terms of how we do this. When you look at local authorities traditionally, they had huge investment around training and development. And it was a pathway, whether it be a gas engineer, whether it be a carpenter, whether it be a building surveyor. And I look at the route to get into that level of professionalism, and it's broad and it gives you the depth of competency to approach problems that you didn't even think of, but your mindset. So I think the organizations are trying to do that. I do think there are some of the courses that the employers need to be thinking really carefully about. I have a really oiled machine, like fine wine, as you can see here, growing in age, but that age actually reflects experience. But I think what we're keen to do is bring new people on that journey that will take time. You can't be a building safety manager because you did a course for 6 weeks. That's just not honest and fair to the residents or the profession. And so I think there's a balance in terms of, as I said earlier, plugging that gap of knowledge. But we've chosen intentionally to be small and grow in the right way with the right skills, and we are growing. And so, yeah, we're working with organizations to help that process and bring that succession planning through. But it's going to take time.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I think, in just to sort of add to that, I think it's a problem for construction and in the built environment generally. I've got two daughters. Neither of them would say they understand at all what I do. I go to work in a suit and come up wearing a high-vis jacket, so I'm not really sure they quite can unpick that, despite how well I try to explain what we do and why it's important and an exciting space to be in. But it's competing with a whole host of other industries that perhaps look and feel a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, it is a tricky one. Phil?
No, I think what Des was saying, a lot of the fire safety organisations are now looking at apprenticeships to try and bring people into the fire world. I think it's down to things like this podcast, really, and to get residents involved, with hearing what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. If you know what we do, there might be opportunity for them to speak to their children. This is what happens. This is another part of society you can venture out into. I think definitely this is a brilliant sector to be in. It has so many different offshoots that can take you into completely different environments and arenas, but it can start in the built housing sector, really. So I think it's more about us telling people what the opportunities are, the rewards, and it is a very rewarding job, and no doubt about it. I think, if we said any building that we looked at for the first time, didn't know much about it, and then a couple of years later it gets it gets a certificate, then that's obviously great for us, but it's great for the individuals involved on each part of that process, really. So I think it's about education. We're a very grey, dry sector on the outside, but actually we do a lot of interesting stuff. We have a I think that's the driver for me. Just encouraging people to have a look at it before they make a decision.
That wasn't a slight against me and Nigel there with the grey bit, was it?
The grey.
I'll take the grey. Maybe you can take the dry.
But you know what, Des? That and Phil, to what you were saying as well. It's about how we tell our story, and you're right. This podcast, this particular segment that we're doing, is about stories behind the strategy. It's easy for residents from the outside looking in and just thinking, oh, that you all don't care. And, you're just doing this. It is just a tick box exercise, and you will dismiss me if you have the opportunity. But being able to actually hear the passion that you do have for this sector, the love that you have for the job that you do, and your deep understanding, I guess, of the weight that you carry and the importance that you have to do. Des, you were talking about the questions, have I done enough? Have we done enough? Being cognizant of the fact that things could go wrong at any moment, but still being able to hold up my hand and say, actually, I am willing to take accountability. I'm willing to be responsible. It is a really, really powerful and moving thing. And I think if we do better at telling our story, then we have a better chance of being able to inspire those around who are thinking about next steps, who are thinking about a pathway to embark on, that this is something that they could actually do and be able to really make a difference in the lives of people just like you and me. And I've said that before about just like you and me. And I guess it's because I think about my own motivation And I think about the fact that my grandparents, or my paternal grandparents, when they came to this country, they were in social housing. They didn't really have a choice or a say of the building, the home that they were put into. And so therefore their safety, they were at the mercy of people like you, who would be making decisions, who would be, ensuring their safety, ensuring certain checks were done, ensuring certain surveys were undertaken, to make sure that they were kept safe. And negligence on any of their parts could have led to, well, ultimately me not even being here today. And I guess for me, that's why I have such a deep respect, and almost, an honor for people who do the work that you do. So I do think it's really important that we do tell our story, and that we do get the message out there so that other people can really have that appreciation of the fact that this is not just another job. It's not something that you should or would get into because you've got nothing better to do with your time, but rather it's deeper than that, because you do have literally the lives of people that you likely will never ever meet practically in your hands. And I think it's something that we really need to take stock of, and be talking about a lot more.
To be frank with you, some of the experienced people that we talk about have run to the hills, because they're saying that, why on earth am I going to take on this level of responsibility at this age and this time in my career? Because these are the people that we need to come back into the industry to help, and people are running to the hills. And I say that with no judgment, but just the facts of the case, what it is. And I think I'm really excited at the fact that you've got a podcast like this to sort of break down the politics and the jargon, that we can actually start to unpick the story. And I think what I would really want to say in this space is that we don't want the backs or anything that we do to become a marketing tool. So often do we meet organizations that come into a space and we're like, wow, we want some of that. And then what we actually get in terms of the operational team that are delivering is a total dichotomy between what was marketed. So what we're keen to do is to make sure that the policies, the way that we drive what we do, and that engagement with the residents goes all the way up, down, left and right, with the people that walk into someone's home, the people that are answering the phones, that they all understand and it's interconnected. I think one of the things for me about which Nigel touched on was leadership. And I'm always keen for all of the players in the room to not just be tunnel vision, to understand all of the parts that feed into this, and remind them of why we're doing this. So I just really wanted to kind of applaud you and thank you for kind of giving us this space. We weren't really keen to come in and start talking, because that's not what we do. We're in the background. But really thank you for giving us the opportunity to share.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. I believe it's a story that needs to be told. And I'm mindful of the fact that we've been talking for some time, and I'm grateful for your time, and I don't want to take up too much more. So I guess I just got a final question maybe for each of you before we wrap today's episode up. And Nigel, I want to start with you. And because you've been on this journey for such a long time, I guess from the infancy of building safety as we know it today up to the present day, if you were to be able to be in charge for the next year or so, and you had your way and nothing was impossible, you could literally snap your finger and make whatever you want to be a reality. What is the one significant change that you would make to the sector?
That's quite an ask in terms of the thing. I'm not sure if there's one thing I can think of the top. I think there's a number of things that we've touched on before. Would be around getting the right people and the right skills, and the building safety manager mandate not coming, I think was a missed opportunity, and one that we have to address. And I think the technology item, and thirdly would be the ability to invest heavily in stock in a very structured asset management program, to ensure that buildings not only come up to standards now, but they are in the long term. And I suppose for the sector generally is to really get the grip on the issue of quality, something that as was identified, a light was shone on it, and the problem has grown. We still need to address that issue around quality, and from quality comes safety. So those will be the things. So more than one, I'm afraid. But
it's all right. That's okay. That's okay. And Phil, for you, I guess, because of, I think about your experience in the fire and rescue service, and you've undoubtedly therefore seen tragedy firsthand. And so the question that I guess I have for you is, given where we are today, is there an experience that you've had, or is there something that you've witnessed, or that has given you hope that we are actually on the right track to safer homes for families all across the country?
I mean, there is just a plethora of things going on that would give anyone that assurance and that confidence, because for me, fire safety was something that I would imagine most people in the general public didn't even know what it meant, really. And for the wrong reasons, now they do, but I think it's everywhere. I think for me, if we're talking as well about what one thing would I change, I'm not sure I'd make it something I would change, but I would definitely find a way for greater transparency for people in these buildings to see what effort goes in to try and protect them, to see how they can work with us. I think it's for me in particular. I don't live in London. I don't live in a tower block, and like everyone in this sector, I spend my waking day thinking how I can make the building safer for total strangers, people I don't know and probably never will know. And that's what we all do. That's what we're all doing this for. No different to the army, to the police, to frontline firefighters as well. We dedicate our every being to trying to protect people we don't know. And I think if we can share that experience with them, that will give people, they'll sleep better at night. I think they'll feel safer in their own homes, knowing there's a load of people out there trying to make sure that they're safe. So for me, that would be the biggest turning point for me.
Thank you for sharing. And Des, I guess my final question to you is, you've been in this industry for a long time. The grey speaks for itself. Mine is hidden away, by the way, so you can't see any of mine. But the question that I have for you is, of course, with the experience that you've had, with the challenges that you've had to overcome, with the difficulties that you've faced, the obstacles that you've had to navigate your way through, what would you say has been the most powerful or the most impactful lesson that you've learned whilst going along this journey? And if you had the ability to therefore package and pass on just a single nugget of wisdom to anyone who's watching, whether they are a resident, whether they work in this space, whether, and everything in between, what would that be?
That's really, believe it or not, an easy answer for me. I grew up in West London, and I knew people that lost their life in Grenfell. And I think that what I phrase sometimes as the pantomime of the agendas and the political stories that take place and inevitably are going to happen because we work in that space, but not to forget the human story. And we are all part of that shared experience because we are people and we are humans. And I just think that for me, the nugget is not to forget them and to not become arrogant, and just remember that we need to provide safe spaces for our families and just kind of shine the light on the human story. When you see some of the conditions that people are having to live in, it's heartbreaking. And I think that I'm glad to be part of an industry that's trying to do that. And I just don't want to lose sight of the human story and the human voice.
Thank you. Well, Nigel, Phil, Desmond, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you all today. There are so many takeaways for me, and I'm really hoping that for those of you who are watching this at home now, or at the office, or on the train, or wherever you may be, that you've been able to identify something, at least one thing in what has been discussed today that will give you some food for thought, and maybe give you a source of inspiration as you go along your journey. And so for Desmond, for Phil, for Nigel, thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best as you continue doing the incredible work that you're doing on behalf of residents, of people who are living in these buildings, who just wanted to know that when they go to bed at night, that they're safe, that their children are safe, that their loved ones are safe. It's often a thankless task because oftentimes people like yourselves are only ever really come into the public sphere when something drastically goes wrong. But I guess this is just a message to say that you are seen, you are valued, you are appreciated. And I truly do hope that you continue to do the excellent work that you are doing for many, many, many more years to come. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.